Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Safety Brief. I'm your host, Elizabeth, and as we all gear up for back to school, we wanted to talk a bit about cybersecurity and protecting students in the digital age. Joining me today, as always, is Matt and Mike. Thank you both for being here and for the dedication of spreading awareness.
No doubt. Thanks for having us.
Of course. So, to kick this off, threats constantly evolve, right? So, with the new school year starting, what are the top cybersecurity threats that students in schools should be aware of and kind of look out for?
Yeah, it's the new. I hear the new school year starting, and I think of a lot of vitamin C and common cold dodging. And so, for any of those listeners with little ones or anyone's really, that the school year brings with it its own viruses, and no pun intended, but viruses can come in many forms for sure. And so, I'd say, top cybersecurity threats. You're definitely going to see themes within the scope of phishing scams specific to school supplies sales and deals and upcoming permission slip forms, things that you would normally expect around this time of year, no different than the holiday time, shopping time, et cetera, et cetera. But definitely more thematically leaning towards how do I get parents unsuspectingly and students to click on these things. Could be as simple as, I don't even know if there's hall passes still anymore, but the concept of, hey, get out of school with this fundraiser, and if you win the fundraiser, you go get lunch with the principal type thing, right? Maybe I'm antiquated in these examples, but I think, again, both students and faculty as well as parents will definitely be targeted. Teachers specifically, right? Because there's so much that they're getting ready for and anticipation for. So if you get an email such as new block schedule modification or hey, new class rosters, hey, that's easy pickings, right? And so there's a lot of pressure plates that are going to be present here as the school year starts off. But both again, school nurses and certain slips going out from medical offices at schools that parents could be very sensitive to, impersonation attempts there as well. So I think, again, trust but verify, same old, right? Same old safety brief, trust but verify everything. But I would say specifically impersonation attempts acting as teachers, faculty, staff, PTA, coaches, et cetera, et cetera. Definitely something to look out for.
Down here, they have eliminated the majority of that, which is really nice because they require everything to go through a registered app. And the app only works for the period of the school year.
There you
go. Any communication has to come through the app. It will notify you that there is a message waiting in the app, but you cannot send anything external. It all has to be done through the app itself. So that helps out quite a bit.
Absolutely.
One of the biggest things, though, that people have to be aware of is the technology that's being used.
Yeah.
I'm going to say a very hard truth here. Your IT department at most educational areas, and this goes from elementary school all the way through high school, are full on dumb. They do not have a budget. They do not have the resources. They don't have anything in order to really keep the entire infrastructure secure. Last I checked at one of the systems down here, they were running technology that was so egregiously outdated that I didn't even have to try to bypass the security because there were still default usernames and passwords that were enabled. That doesn't really make you feel warm and fuzzy. So one of the biggest things is knowing that your information can and possibly is being viewed by pretty much anybody unless they are really bolstering that infrastructure. But they don't have the budget to do that. Budgets keep getting cut. And if they're not paying the teachers, they sure as hell aren't paying the support staff. I can promise you that. There's generally, down here, I think it was one person for every 5 to 10 schools that had to go and do like maintenance calls for any of the tech stuff. So if something was broken, they would have to wait until that person had time on their schedule to come around.
Right.
So imagine if, there's something that needs on-site patching being done or upgrades or anything that can't be done remotely. you're vulnerable until that person has time to actually come around and put their hands on it and fix it for you. So that's the biggest thing that I'm generally looking at.
Absolutely. Now let's dive into a little bit of collaboration. Growing up, I never heard anything from my teachers or parents or anything on cybersecurity, looking out for myself or, anything of that nature. So how can parents and educators work together to teach students about safe online behavior and the importance of cybersecurity altogether?
It's an
Yeah,
interesting one.
it definitely is. And I think, at least specific to our application of where we're at in the parenting journey and the student education journey is parent and educators got to be on the same team. Standards in the classroom as far as technology usage got to align in some form or fashion with at least expectations of where it starts in the classroom, where it ends, right? And I know that this is relevant for a lot of parents right now due to the sheer mass of educational institution provided devices, whether it's an iPad you're learning on or a tablet or a Chromebook or something, right? So these students at any age, kindergarten, first, second, third, all the way up to K through 12, and college, are encountering media and devices in their daily life. And
Mhm.
so they, it's very similar to the cloud architect's dilemma of where does my security as the administrator start and where does the cloud provider security start, so it's very difficult to articulate where does the stop and start line begin and end. And so I think just making sure that there's a dialogue between parents and educators over, hey, what can these devices access, what kind of security is applied to these devices, not only that but what kind of monitoring or surveillance is present on these devices, for both good and bad. So if they're educational provided devices, they should be used for educational use. But if they can access Netflix, YouTube, etc.,
They can.
uh, certainly in good instances they can with good MDM. But I think it's again just a matter of making sure there's a dialogue between parents and educators. Parents got to be asking intentional questions. They can't assume educators and their respective IT staff are going to think of all these things, right? And obviously every parent's conviction level will vary, but safe online behavior, anybody, parents and educators included, it has to be a dialogue point. It has to be a dialogue point. Can't be an email, can't be just a PSA. Really encourage every parent to, if you haven't met your son or daughter's educator, again, through K through 12, they're spending sometimes more time with your child than you are in a
Mhm.
work week. So definitely something to start with this dialogue.
Yeah, I do want to bring up too, like checking your students' devices. Some schools, I guess, you check in and check out your device on a daily basis, but some schools allow you to take those devices home, and you're assigned that device for the entirety of the school year. Something I did witness in high school was students jailbreaking their tablets so they can watch Netflix, YouTube, and play games and so on and so forth. So, like Matt, you said that no, they can't, but if your school's not practicing good cybersecurity and putting those protections in place, your child or someone your child may know may have the ability to get access to those things that you don't want to. So definitely keeping an eye out on that information, checking in with them, and even if you're a teacher, check in on those devices. It's not just a plug and play. Don't just hand out those devices and call it good. Definitely check out what the students are accessing on that.
Yeah, the good thing about down here is the devices don't go home. They're not allowed to.
That's a good
That's
practice,
huge.
in my
And as
opinion.
they get older, they are required to buy their own stuff. So who gives a
There you
crap
go.
if they jailbreak their own stuff? That's
Yeah.
on them.
Right.
Plus, there needs to be, and I know we're talking about there needs to be unity between the teaching, the educational staff, and the parents, but there needs to be more onus on parents actually parenting.
Correct.
This is something that does not happen. Oh, well, you didn't tell my child that they couldn't do this with their tablet. Okay, well, where were you?
Yeah.
Maybe, oh, I don't know, disconnect from watching the Kardashians and do something that's actually parenting. Or, I don't know, just be more present. The entire reason that things escalate to a point where it needs some kind of an intervention, be it with the device being used inappropriately, etc., is because there's a lack of ground rules. There's a lack of discipline around how to actually handle said devices. Now, I
Modern.
mean, can't really say that I'm leading by example there, because the entire reason I am where I am is because I did everything that you could that was wrong with devices.
He put Doom on his graphing calculator in class.
I did. Sadly, I actually did. I'm the same person that I will be very honest with you. They told us that we were supposed to bring our calculators and we were supposed to clear the memory. I had a very advanced calculator. I had the ability to back it up in multiple different ways. So I cleared the memory. They saw that it was cleared, and then I reloaded the program from a backup.
As one does.
So I had
As any good
everything
system
that
administrator does.
Exactly. I had everything set there with every formula that I would need for
Gotta have backups.
everything on the exam.
It's just working smarter, not harder, right?
Anyway,
I mean, in my defense, I did what they said. I cleared it. They didn't say I couldn't restore it.
templates are templates. Innovation,
There you
man.
go.
Can't knock it.
It was no different than the people that I saw that drew all the formulas and would take the TI-86 calculators had that big ass lid that you could put on the top of them.
Mm-hmm.
They would take the lid off. They would write all the formulas on the inside, and they would put the lid backwards.
Note card.
And they would just come around to make sure you cleared the memory. They wouldn't check inside, so you just slide that down, and you had everything that you needed right there as well. It was no different.
Where security exists, threat actors can find a way. That's the moral of that story.
Basically, yes. And also that humans are the weakest point of security. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Yeah.
But no, that's there needs to be a unity between the educational staff and the parents, but there also needs to be, as I just said, there's a lack of actual parenting that is happening these days.
Not only that, but awareness. So a lot of parents aren't aware of the security risks out there for themselves. So if they're not aware of these security risks and like breaches and things of that nature, how can they, be held responsible to teach and make their children aware of these threats as well? So I think that's another really important thing, is just make sure that you have the awareness yourself and spread that awareness to your children.
Well, a curriculum needs to actually be put in place as well. Long ago, in a bygone era, you used to go through these things called like wood shop, metal shop, home economics, things that taught you practical skills that you needed in order to survive. And then for some reason, we got rid of those, thinking, oh, there's no reason for us to actually do that. Well, guess what? We had an entire generation of Muppets that don't know how to balance a checkbook, mainly because they don't even know what a checkbook is. Now,
learning to do my taxes would have been helpful.
Exactly. Now there is actually a requirement. And I hate to say this because you guys know that I'm very much not West Coast. California is the first place that I've seen that's actually putting this in place. They're making people go through and balance a checkbook before they can graduate high school. That is actually part of an exam
Learning's
that they
occurring,
are having
man.
to do.
Learning's occurring.
It has to be done. So what we should be doing, instead of going through 12 years of education, getting out into the real world, and then people finding out, oh God, there's all kinds of stuff that I don't know. We need to be educating people with some level of cyber knowledge as they are growing up.
Yeah.
Yes, you're given a tablet to use. Okay, let's talk about the good and bad ways that a tablet can be used. Mind you, there needs to be a disclaimer. We are not trying to tell you how you can do bad things with this tablet in school, but it needs to be learned. It needs to be understood, because things are becoming easier for people to actually take over and do bad things. This lets people do bad things. I love it.
The new graphing calculator.
It is the new graphing calculator. It does not play Doom, but I did play Snake on it.
There you go.
That counts. I mean, that was fun. But things are becoming easier. So we need to take the initiative to actually educate. The younger that you start learning this stuff, the easier it is. They taught me French when I was a kid, from kindergarten through third grade. It was so much easier to learn because now I listen to it and I'm sitting here going, no, my brain cannot learn that.
When
you're younger, you're moldable.
Yeah.
100%.
So if we start a cyber curriculum and we start putting it in, I would say probably around maybe first grade. I wouldn't say kindergarten. I've seen kindergartners. Trust me, I'm just happy they're not eating glue by the time they graduate kindergarten.
That is indeed a measure of success.
It really is. You'd be surprised. That and glitter.
Luckily, I'm not
Glitter.
there yet with my little one.
Glue and glitter, dude.
Just wait.
Yeah.
When they start eating glitter, you get to have some really fun conversations. Uh,
But that was
but
a fun.
around first grade, second grade is when we should start having those conversations with them about technology and how technology can be good or bad.
And
I'm
how
having those conversations because there's online games, Roblox, Minecraft, all these things. Random people can add you on Roblox and start trying to communicate to you. You know how
easily.
bad that is? That's really poorly designed and implemented. So I had to have conversations. And I said, you do not talk to anybody that you do not know and that I do not know. That was a very, very easy conversation to have. And it's something that's been upheld. But learning about safety, learning about how technology is good, but how people can leverage that for bad. Those are things that we need to be teaching people instead of surprising them as they get older and something happens.
Yeah. So speaking of teaching, what steps can schools take to secure their networks and protect sensitive data from security attacks? Because they do hold a
Actually,
lot of sensitive data of the parents, the students, the employers.
could
Yeah.
actually pay their IT team. That would be helpful.
I mean,
Or
budget's
have
a
one.
big, yeah, budget's a hot topic for sure. I think, again, there's positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement, right? So we're in the parenting theme. You can obviously institute a discipline or a punishment for negative behavior. You can certainly reward positive behavior. Both are good. But I specifically on this matter, I think, specifically because it affects youth, like, fines should be in place for mishandling some of these things. There has to be some level of, guidance, I think, in the near future saying, hey, like these are not adults. These are minors, right? And so their PII, their PHI has to be weighted differently. And I know HIPAA and PCI DSS have probably already had this dialogue that data is data, regardless of age, regardless of consent or whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
it does say, again, it's interesting because as a parent or a guardian, you're essentially inheriting that legal liability, right? So like for any field trip or school form or anything, you're signing for your child all the way up until they can't enlist themselves in the military. And so you're going to have to sign and assume that. But I think, again, it should be, all data should be treated equally and handled equally. But I think there is a measure of risk that those that seek to inflict real harm can and certainly manipulate, kids, again, kids' names. There's a phishing, spear phishing attempts we've seen with that involve school nurses citing that
Mm-hmm.
your student, your child has come down with this, or they were injured on the playground or whatever. It's dark stuff. It really is. And so again, how could they get their name? They don't have a social media account. It's like, how else would they be able to access that information, right? We don't
By
publish
trolling
our kids'
Facebook and
names.
Instagram.
Yeah, for sure. And so again, it's both on the school's part, but you got to remember what you're publishing online is OSINT. It's open source intelligence. And so you got to be cognizant of where you're sharing these things. We've talked in many an episodes past about parents having extreme caution about posting photos of their their children online, of any form, like faces and names, and could those two be corroborated and build a deep fake or build an identity? So again, it's on schools. I believe financial repercussions in the way of negative discipline should be warranted, again, because once the data's out, there's no getting it back. Blood types for school nurses, and again, this is covered under HIPAA, but I think schools specifically, as Matt had mentioned, historically have a more lean budget,
Mm-hmm.
and so understandably so. But doing with what they can. I'm sure we have listeners that are involved in the school districts and involved in education, right? So this isn't a disparaging conversation that you're doing it wrong and you're the problem. But again, I think it comes back to the fact that, hey, as parents, they are our children. And we have to be bought in some form or fashion, just as Matt said, to number one, the discussion, which leads to an awareness, and number two, the strategic elements of it, And in this way, right, learning, it has to be a safe space to do that, right? So when you're learning how to drive a car, you need positive examples of how to do that responsibly. When you're learning to consume alcohol, you need positive examples of how to do that responsibly. It's no different than devices. It's no different with devices and data. And so it's just less tangible, less kinetic, and so often it gets forgot about. And
the new requirements that schools are actually putting in place, where they are restricting access to cellular devices, mobile phones.
Yep.
That's actually huge, because you can do more with your phone than you can with most of these devices that they give you at school.
Most definitely.
There's more damage that can be done as well, because you, again, as we've mentioned before, parents posting things about their kids is one thing, but as your kids get older, they're going to start posting their own stuff. And they're all going to want to be Instagram famous or an influencer. So they're not thinking about the security of what they're posting. They're thinking about, how can I get as many people as possible to actually see what I'm posting?
Reach.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily a good thing, because you're basically telling people everything about your life. You're telling them your schedule, your likes, your dislikes. If somebody really wants to sit down and figure out how they can do something against you, you're giving them all the ammo that they could ever want in one easy to look location, or a couple different easy to look locations. And that conversation needs to be had both in schools and at home about looking out for your own privacy.
Right.
The world isn't like it was back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. It's completely different. Even the 90s, it was a little bit, it was okay. You could let your kids, play outside and not worry about stuff. Yeah.
Right.
Nowadays, they go ride their bikes outside, and I'm quite literally sitting there on the doorbell watching what's going on if I'm not outside myself.
Yeah.
And
So
it's
Sorry. Yeah, so speaking of social media, cyberbullying is also a huge and serious issue. So what should students be aware of regarding cyberbullying, and how can they ensure their safety on social media? Matt, you
don't
kind of
get on social media.
yeah.
There are actually initiatives in place right now that will fully restrict children from accessing social media until they are 16 or 17 years old. And it's
I
because
think that's
children
smart.
are on social media at such a young age, and they're impressionable, and they are very moldable at that time, that it could do a lot of significant damage to them by getting on there. And it's cyberbullying is no different than what we dealt with, when we were younger, or I dealt with when I was younger. I seriously doubt you guys were in the category. I was the nerd that may as well have just carried a briefcase to school. So, there you go.
I do want to comment on that, because you say it's no different, but honestly, it's 1,000 times different, because cyberbullying takes it to where it's not just your school and your community, but it's the entire world. Someone in France,
It
someone
can be.
across the world could see this viral video
Right.
of someone being cyberbullied. So yeah, I do get what you mean. Like, it is kind of the same, but it's on a huge scale,
Right.
a huge scale, and that's a
I'm
lot
looking
of
at more
pressure to put on
localized,
a
though.
child. Yeah, but a lot of the times they're not localized. You look at these trending videos. If a video is trending, whether
Right.
it's
Just post
negatively
it on social.
impacting someone or not, it can spread around the entire world. I mean, there's plenty of examples here, but a lot of them are inappropriate, so I won't reword them,
Right.
but
Right.
you don't want to be one of those trends. You don't.
Right. No, it's on both sides of the point. It's fascinating because both from, hey, I got an embarrassing photo at somebody at a party when they were consuming alcohol, right? Like, if that's a Polaroid or a physical photo, there is a level of damage control. Give me the photo, confiscate the photo. 20 years ago, damage controlled, right? Once it's out, it's almost near impossible to put edges around the damage control of whatever the fallout could be. And we've seen positive examples of this with accountability of people that have certainly had certain behaviors in their past, but there's also a lot of toxicity embedded within cancel culture that's now driving, hey, I'm going to go find this content from this thing posted 25, 36 60 years ago, whatever it is, and dig it back up. So there's a dangerous precedent here when it goes electronic. But one thing I did want to just briefly highlight is that for all the parents listening and students, the Surgeon General of the United States came out in an official statement in May of last year, basically issuing what is the precursor, in my belief, to a disclaimer on a cigarette box. So when cigarettes came out, they were heavily marketed. They were marketed on media, radio, TV, anywhere that it could be marketed as it'll help you breathe better, it'll help you run faster, it'll be right. Like there's crazy claims, right? And what their advertised benefits were. Stay with me here for the analogy between online media and social media and toxicity in your lungs, right? And so following multiple studies done, enough hospitalizations and things that led to cancer, that the Surgeon General had to come back and say, hey, if you're going to continue to sell these things and profit off these things, you have to have a label on every single carton where it's disclaiming you are letting people know in advance after you've gotten them addicted to your product that this is seriously damaging to your health. Feel free to quote me. In 2 to 3 years, mobile devices with any form of connectivity, I think as soon as 2 to 3 years, maybe 5, will have to issue a disclaimer on the devices saying, due to the nature of what this permits access to, there is mental health repercussions. There is obviously physical health repercussions if you're never getting off the couch, never getting out of a chair and doing it. But again, it's just fascinating to see this go as large of scope, specifically because it cites that there are ample indicators that social media may pose a harm to mental health and well-being of children. While there may be some benefits, right, socially, but with 95% of young people ages 13 to 17 reporting using social media platform, more than a third saying they use it almost constantly. It's almost, again, it's an isolation advertising itself as socializing, right? We could be in a room with 30 people at dinner, but nobody's talking to each other, nobody's looking, right? And so the negative repercussions of this. So how does this translate to cyberbullying? Is simple that this is becoming the vehicle. This is becoming the vehicle. And more so than saying so-and-so to face, now we have people in the comment section. Now we have people direct messaging people, right? Like death threats online, right? Things that we would never say to people face-to-face, but how nasty the human heart can be if there's no accountability, right? And when you have open forums and messaging apps and very little unfettered access to these things, no different than the chat rooms of 10, 15 years ago. There's also a relevance here. We're not going down the rabbit hole, but, Bloomberg posted an article just last week on Roblox saying they have very specific pedophile problem. And I know that we're getting a little bit dark, a little uncomfortable here, but again, this is for parents. This is for IT practitioners and anybody and the like. This is safety brief content. This is, hey, children need safeguarding. They need safeguarding. They not just deserve it. They don't warrant it, but they need it. It is our responsibility.
Is why there are settings within Roblox that restricts the ability for anybody that is not specifically added to your friends list from contacting you.
Right.
And that means they cannot send you a request to be friends. You have to reach out to them in order to be friends.
Right.
That is something that every parent should automatically have turned on inside the app the second that it is installed.
Absolutely. And again, how does that awareness even come about? By doing your research. What does my kid have access to? Who has access to my child online gaming? I bought him a game. It's an outlet. It's healthy for him. It's Minecraft. And I believe in the healthy aspects of these outlets. Don't get me wrong. I'm not over here unplug, deassociate, right? But I think we can't proceed forward uneducated or ignorant, right? Like we can't say, I'm not good at that, or we can't say, there's really not that much bad. It is real. Because what we've done with mobile devices is if bullying happened at school, guess what? Go home. Okay, is the bully at home? Maybe in some certain cases, absolutely. But you could physically separate it. Now that we have they follow us everywhere we go, we bring them. And so we're almost, more vulnerable just because we have this method of access to everybody. And so anyway, again, didn't want to go down the rabbit hole, but specific to the cyberbullying, I wanted to mention both the Surgeon General's report. This is publicly accessible information on the U.S. government's website, as well as the Bloomberg article specifically towards Roblox and the repercussions, right, if we proceed ignorantly or uneducated.
No, thank you so much for that, Mike. And for any podcast listeners, we will post the links to these articles in the description as well, so you guys can go ahead and navigate there. Well, to close off this discussion, we want to, provide some more advice for anyone who is interested in pursuing a career in cybersecurity. So, what advice would you give any students that are interested, and how can they start building their skills and knowledge now? Because I mean, there's things online to where students can start building their knowledge of cybersecurity and gear up for a career in cybersecurity at a pretty young age now.
Yeah, I mean, I just the 60 seconds or less. You can't learn it if you don't practice it.
Hmm.
Practicing is learning. So how secure, not just your bank, not just your social media, but how secure your gaming platform accounts, how secure your, whatever it could be. If it's a login and it doesn't have MFA on it, there's risk. If it's a login, you've used the same password on every login, then the risk is everywhere, right? And so I think, just making sure that you start identifying, hey, risk is not a corporate term. It is a individual personal term, no different than how we purchase car insurance, life insurance, health insurance, right? We are mitigating, transferring risk to those things willingly with monetary value, right? And so I think if you conceptualize risk and say, hey, what risk do I assume? What risk do I mitigate? What risk do I just accept? That, hey, I'm going for a walk. I may get rained on. Water risk, right? And so, but it's everywhere. And so specifically, if you are pursuing cybersecurity, you can't, in my opinion, you can't really quantify the weight of what you will be tasked with until you really, really internalize what is risk. What does that mean? How measurable is it? How do I measure it? And then from there, obviously, practice what you're learning. Apply it to your mobile devices. Apply it to your, and then that's where the rabbit hole opens up, because you can have hardware, YubiKeys applied to every laptop and account you have, right? You can go down the rabbit hole for very little money, but again, start practicing those skills now, and it will bear the fruit of being a better practitioner.
Yeah, and there's a lot of free online open source, education as well. I think try Hack Me, Hack the Box, Over the Wire, things of those nature, Code Academy. These are all free resources where, I think if you're at least at a middle school age, it would be appropriate for you to start, educating yourself more on those, doing those learning paths, and just gearing yourself up. Because, like Matt said earlier, the younger you start, the better. So. Well, that wraps up our discussion for today on back to school cybersecurity and protecting students in the digital age. A big thank you to our insightful experts, Mike and Matt, as always. Also, be sure to join us next time as we continue to explore the important topics to help spread awareness and best practices on the safety brief. Plus, don't forget to join us for the upcoming Partner Portal launch webinar on August 14th. You'll get a chance to see the portal, gain access if you're a partner, and possibly win one of the first ever partner appreciation badges from the Blockworks community. If you're not a partner, feel free to join the webinar and ask questions and learn more about what Blockworks can offer you as a trusted cybersecurity partner. Well, until then, take care and stay frosty. Thank you so much for watching.
Thanks all.